I needed this music stand because otherwise the raw animal magnetism of this audience would have overpowered me. So think of this as my shield. I want to talk to you about how our ideological landscape is going to change over the next few decades. I had originally hoped to talk to you about how it will change over the next few centuries, but I thought that it would blow your minds a little bit too much, so I'm going to go in a smaller chunk. This is necessarily a speculative exercise, and it will strike many of you as more than a little ridiculous, so I thank you in advance for your indulgence. Ideologues get very little respect. We think of ideologies as rigid orthodoxies that fail to reckon with a messy, complex world, and we think of ideologues as peddlers of dangerous illusions. But there's another way to think of ideology and ideologues, namely as solvers of a very basic and important problem. It is very hard to rally people around addressing a common challenge. Indeed, it is very hard to get people to agree on the existence of a common challenge. As the behavioral scientist Reed Hastie recently observed, our brains are built for visual and narrative thinking, not logical or mathematical thinking. Seeing is believing. But to believe in that which is unseen, that invisible viruses or rising CO2 emissions can be a deadly threat, we need compelling stories. The problem with the most compelling stories, of course, is that they are necessarily simplifications. They necessarily gloss over causal density. They draw our attention to some things which are true at the expense of drawing our attention from other things which are also true. That doesn't change the fact that we need these compelling stories. Over time, however, ideological stories grow less and less plausible, whether because the common problem or challenge originally addressed has been solved or superseded, or because newer, more pressing problems have emerged. I think of the emergence of new ideological stories as acts of kaleidoscope shaking. A political community that is divided on one set of questions is shaken up by ideologues or coalition merchants who foster new alignments that are in some cases very different from the old ones. You see this throughout American history. For example, when you look at the conflicts over slavery, which later evolved into conflicts over the rights of industrial workers, which later evolved into something very different. And this also meant that coalitions kind of reshaped around these new central and defining questions. This is one reason why the rise of the pirate parties of Northern Europe has been so striking and exciting. In an age of peer production and collaborative consumption, the pirate movement has made a powerful argument against intellectual monopolies and for the free flow of knowledge. Conventional left-right discourse has underestimated the importance of this debate because it tends to fixate on what is tractable and legible. We focus on income because it is the kind of wealth that we can most easily measure and understand. Yet the freedom to create and share ideas and to put them into practice is profoundly important, as a generation of tinkerers and geeks understands better than those that came before it. It is certainly possible that the pirate movement will be assimilated to conventional politics, like the Green movement that came before it. Yet it is also possible that the pirate movement prefigures a larger disruption of left-right politics and discourse across the market democracies of the Americas, Europe, and Asia. If it really is true that the technological empowerment of citizens is the central social and economic development of our time, what kind of new political formations will emerge as a result and as a response? My guess, and it is only a guess, is that what we think of as the left will evolve into the party of cognitive democracy, while what we think of as the right will evolve into the party of diversity. First, the left. Conservatives and libertarians often attack statism on the grounds that it is excessively centralized and unresponsive to the needs of citizens and consumers. The progressives of the 1900s put a great deal of faith in rational bureaucratic governance and enlightened elites, as did the modernizing technocrats of post-war Europe. But the left of the future will not be a statist left, nor will it be an accommodationist left that aims to merely tinker around the edges of a market economy. Rather, it will be a left that promotes robust democratic decision-making as superior to market decision-making. This left will champion economic equality to limit power asymmetries that might otherwise corrupt the democratic process. What this will mean in practice is not entirely clear. Some parties of the left will embrace direct democracy, like the pirate movement. Others will more ambitiously call for transforming, say, the global financial system into a democratically accountable public utility. Regardless, we can expect a left that will be inspired as much by Dig, Reddit, and Stack Exchange as by Marx. Of course, not everyone will welcome this expansion of the domain of democratic decision-making, particularly members of groups that fear that democratic solidarity will in practice mean democratic conformity, which leads us to the coming transformation of the right. Whether in the Christian democratic parties of Europe or America's heavily evangelical GOP, parties of the right in the market democracies have been built around the idea of a shared cultural consensus. As this consensus fades, however, these parties have often taken on a defensive cast, fighting rearguard actions against cultural change. Going forward, the fact that cultural pluralism is here to stay will be embraced, grudgingly at first, but enthusiastically in time. The core ideological insight of this pluralist right will be that government and governance are not one and the same. Limiting the power of the state will, in the view of this pluralist right, create space for new civic institutions to experiment with new modes of governance. The goal will be a flourishing ecology in which the Church of Latter-day Saints competes and coexists with kibbutzes and co-ops with hundreds or perhaps even millions of members, offering alternative visions of the good life and having the means to actually enforce and pursue them. As fanciful as this scenario might sound, the political convulsions of the last 5 years serve as clear evidence that electorates on both sides of the Atlantic are desperate for newer, more compelling stories, and it's our job to come up with them. Thanks very much.